So, Sean, we're back.
We are back.
For the listener, thanks to some editing trickery, we are recording this at a different time from the rest of the podcast, which you will hear. It is tomorrow.
It's actually today. If you're listening when this has been launched, this is today, but the rest was yesterday.
Yes, for us, this is the future. For you, it's the present. But for us, it's also the past. So now that's all cleared up.
That's crystal clear, I think.
So we actually recorded the rest of the episodes before the Commons vote yesterday about the Privileges Committee's reports into Boris Johnson. And we thought we'd be remiss not to discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one thing we hate, PoliticsJOE, is being remiss.
Mm-hmm.
So
Ollie actually called up the both of us and shouted at us down the phone for not talking about it in the original part.
He'll be pissed off that you mentioned it, but he did do that from his one of his many homes.
He is a landlord.
It was his third or fourth home, and he was there to jack up the prices in this slum housing that he owns.
Mm-hmm.
So
you could hear the echo from the corridor that he was in with all of the families that were.
and he told that single mother to shut up.
He did, yeah.
Anyway, well, Ollie's also massively against the Privileges Committee's report.
yeah, along with these stories that we're going to talk about.
So the Commons did vote to back the report. Interestingly, there was a ton of abstentions, and 7 MPs voted against the report. 6 of whom are Conservatives, one of whom is a Labour MP who essentially had to force a vote in the Commons by dissenting because Labour are wanting to put it on. They say, we want to put on record those bastards who are betraying the country.
It's it's not even a smart move. It's just like, it seems very standard, doesn't it? That if you want maximum damage from something like this, you don't want it to be an ayes and noes vote.
Yeah.
You want it to be formalised. You want everybody to see who has voted for what, right?
Because at the next election, the MP in the MP's constituencies, the constituency Labour Party is going to have on their leaflets voted against this report, or they'll say it in sexier language, then voted against the privilege.
Big X by them.
There was it was an interesting day in Parliament in that there was lots of, I think, just very nuts moments. So
yeah.
Should we have a listen?
Yeah, let's have a listen.
Boris Johnson did not knowingly or intentionally mislead this House. The reason, if people would like to listen, that I say that is that last year for 6 months I was one of Boris Johnson's parliamentary private secretaries. And I was the only Member of Parliament who was with him for the whole day on the publication of the Sue Gray report. When he read that...
Very grateful for the Honourable Lady giving way. She says, having read the report, that she sees no evidence of Boris Johnson's wrongdoing. Does she agree with me that there is none so blind as those who will not see?
Those who argue that now the report has been published, it's all over and done, and those who say the dogs bark but the caravan moves on, miss the wood for the trees. The caravan of this House, having moved on, will certainly come back. And then the dogs will not only merely bark, but they will bite.
Is it thought that this House, when it comes to a conclusion, must be obeyed? Is it the case that we must not criticise the Dangerous Dogs Act because it was passed by this great and noble House? Or are we in fact allowed to criticise as a fundamental of free speech that which happens to us, that which is reported about us, that which is said of us? When somebody is in court, they are allowed to say that the court has made a mistake. And the protections of courts, of the junior courts with juries sitting in them, are quite rightly very strict. But you can still say that the court has got it wrong. Indeed, you're allowed to say it's got it so wrong that you may go to appeal. You don't have to kowtow. Right. But for some reason, the Privileges Committee thinks it's in communist China and that we must kowtow.
It talks about, it's not what the Prime Minister said, it's the interpretation given it by members of this House, by the media and by the public. The former Prime Minister Boris Johnson cannot be held responsible for what people thought he may have meant. He should be held responsible, if this report is to hold any water, on what he said.
will vote against it because I think the process is flawed. I will vote against it because pleasing the opposition won't bring back the loved ones for my constituents. I will vote against it because the right honourable gentleman has already left, so the vote, in some cases, is already futile. I will vote against because I think the right honourable gentleman has been punished enough. I will abstain because I will vote against because if I ask the people to forgive, then so must I.
So there was a lot there. So who you heard from was, you heard from Leonici, Nick Fletcher, amongst others. They're not household names. I think most people might struggle to name more than a handful of MPs. You'd certainly struggle to name Leonici and a Nick Fletcher, in that I don't think I've ever seen Leonici before.
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself.
Are you a Nietzsche head?
I'm a Nietzschean Tory. Yeah. I believe in Nietzschean economics.
Is that like in terms of like the Übermensch, or is that like in terms?
No. Leonici.
Leonici.
Do not get mixed up with Friedrich Nietzsche.
Her speech was just rambling, and she's made a real name for herself, which is perhaps what she wanted to do, but I think in the wrong way. In that,
I think there's a lot, like, out of the folk that spoke yesterday, particularly Leonici, it seems like they've just not gotten the memo that the Conservative Party has moved on from Boris Johnson, right? Like, it's now been formalised that he's done and dusted. The only time he's going to get in is if Leonici puts him on as a guest of hers to get into the parliament, right? Like, he's going to be walking around with a visitor's pass for the rest of his life, or until he creates his own party and gets an MPC from that. But yeah, it's peculiar how there's herself, Nick Fletcher, Bill Cash, that are backing somebody in a nearly like 2019, 2020 kind of way of just having no regard for what the Privileges Committee has found, and just nitpicking on small paragraphs and sentences here and there. Like, even Jacob Rees-Mogg was doing it yesterday. He was naming specific paragraphs and saying, well, this, in the wider context of a 300-page report, that means I cannot possibly vote for this with this small vocab error in the middle of this report.
And he even abstained.
Yeah,
he didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't follow through. He didn't back his boy.
Same with Leonici. Like, she came out all guns blazing and then just went out with a fizzle in the end.
Yeah, I think it's actually quite unconservative, and I mean that in like with a big C, in that the Conservative Party is so ruthless and so good at shedding their skin, shedding the trappings of the previous leader, and embracing the new thing. That's the thing about how ruthless they were when they got rid of Thatcher. And there's the Johnson fans within the Parliamentary Conservative Party are clinging on to Johnson. He can't do anything for them now.
Well, she's a 2019er though, isn't she?
But like I think she doesn't need to. She needs to recognise that Johnson is yesterday's man. He's at the moment, your political career is probably it's contingent on embracing Sunak or the new Conservative Party.
Maybe not even Sunakism. It's like you got in as an archetypal Northern Tory, or like wherever her constituency is. You got in as the archetype of him.
So Leonici is from the MP
Grimsby.
in Great Grimsby, I think.
Yeah, Great Grimsby.
And Sean asked where that was. I said it was Derbyshire. It's not Derbyshire.
And I've no idea where that is anyway. So he could have been right.
That's near Ipswich, isn't it? So you have two non-Englishmen discussing the geography of England, and
I would love to see an English person sat here explain the geography of Ireland or Scotland to us, because they definitely wouldn't be able to do that.
I don't know. They've got some good maps of Ireland from previous.
From the 1700s.
Yeah.
Like, don't go here, savages. So the people like her, people like Nick Fletcher, I think is also a 2019er. They're getting in off of this archetype of what a Northern Tory should be, based off of what Dominic Cummings was vetting people in those constituencies to look like, to sound like, for them to match up with the personality of Boris Johnson. They should have been aware that there was going to come a time where Boris Johnson was not the leader anymore, and so should have been fluid enough in their own personal branding to be like, not necessarily being able to align themselves with Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss. Arguably, they didn't really have to do much realigning to be a Trussite. But at least have some sort of heft to you as a constituency MP, rather than just being a Boris Johnson 2019er, that you can avoid these embarrassing moments in Parliament 4 years on, where you're being forced to defend somebody for no apparent reason apart from he got me into Parliament in the first place, right?
That's the main. I think that's the main takeaway. Is it just seems irrational?
Yeah.
Like most, regardless of your political persuasions, if someone with an opposing view is making a point, you could hopefully most of the time you can at least understand their perspective, and it is a rational point. This just seems wildly irrational and just like braying. I don't understand to what end they're trying to do this. Someone made the point that there's now 3 kind of spheres within the Conservative Parliamentary Party. There's those who think they should back the Privileges Committee report, like Theresa May. There's those who are abstaining, like Rishi Sunak,
like most of the party.
And then there's the braying, screaming, crying. This is a stitch up.
Yeah,
like
and like, but that's the
Jacob
question.
Rees-Mogg,
Then,
but it's interesting, like the blend between them. Jacob Rees-Mogg was decrying this. Nadine Dorries has talked about it being a stitch up. What they have is they don't have the. It's all fart no poo.
Yeah,
they don't have the cojones to follow through with it.
Dorries didn't even show up yet. So, well, I mean, is she able to go into Parliament? Yeah, she's still an MP.
Yeah,
but didn't show up. Mogg did show up, said he was going to vote against it, and then abstained.
I think, is that, are they playing kind of double politics, and are they having their cake and eating it too, in terms of they can say, they can point to one thing and say, I was loyal to Boris Johnson. Yeah. But if that goes down the pan, then they could say, I didn't vote against the Privileges Committee report.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think either of us, in fact, are deep enough into the inner workings of the Conservative Party to know whether.
I talk to them a lot.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's true. You probably know better than I do. I'm not sure how much weight it holds to be a Johnsonite anymore. You know, like Sunak is the leader of the party. Sunak is willfully inconspicuous about his alliance to Boris Johnson, or his allegiance to Boris Johnson, or even his friendship. Didn't say whether he was going to vote for or against or abstain if he was going to be in the Parliament yesterday. Last minute made a call with Zelensky and the Prime Minister of Sweden just to say that he was going to be busy at the time.
John Cray said a good line about Sunak always phones Zelensky when he's feeling guilty.
Yeah.
Which I think is
Vladimir, I'm feeling a bit sad.
What are you up to, man? How's it going? Tough day at the office for me.
I can imagine.
Sorry,
you have no idea.
Going on and on.
How are you, Vladimir?
How are you? I really sympathise with what you're going through, Zelensky.
No jets for you just yet. Yeah, I think it's a weird dynamic where people because Mogg doesn't really need to show any allegiance to Boris Johnson anymore. You know, he's still going to be the constituency candidate in Northeast Somerset. Whether he gets in or not is another question. I think that's still up in the air, isn't it, with recent polling and whatever. But he's a stalwart of this Conservative Party. For this generation of Conservatives, he is going to be there for a very, very long time. He doesn't need Boris Johnson. Nadine Dorries probably does, I don't think it just doesn't make sense to me to have someone like that can go like, oh, well, look, I've got my Boris badge and I've got my Rishi badge and I've got, he can be his own section of the Conservative Party. He can probably even co-opt what has been left behind by Boris Johnson in many ways,
I wonder if that is the play then. If you are, because I kind of disagree. I think there is some sense of being a Johnsonite in that Johnsonism is far more popular, or has won more votes in the Conservative Party at large than Sunakism.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
So he's still popular with the members. It's still the mandate that the government was elected with.
Yeah,
so I think there is some sense in maintaining the Johnson aura around you. I think maybe it's just, but I think clinging onto it, it's like, I don't know.
Like the question is, where do you go from now? It's all stamped.
Instead of embracing Gordon Brown, it's like being like deathly loyal to Tony Blair, because it's not going to be that different. It's just a different figurehead.
Yeah.
And one person won you the election, and one person is less charismatic.
Don't you dare! Get Gordon Brown's name out of your mouth.
I don't know. He has less. Gordon Brown had less star power than Tony Blair did. Sunak has less star power than Boris Johnson does.
Yeah,
and there's other parallels, of course, such as the. No, I'm done. I thought there was going to be a good bit there, but
sorry, is that my fault?
Yeah, I think so. Go on.
Wait, there's other parallels.
No, it's fine.
No,
fine.
I'm sorry.
Even Ollie would have done that. That's fine.
I'm sorry. I'm not as well versed in pubcast banter as
I can tell.
Yeah.
Why do you think the MPs who spoke in favour of the committee's report? Why do you think they did that? Why were they not
like the Tory MPs?
Yeah, like Theresa May, etc. I mean, it's fairly obvious because they don't need to appeal to anything. They are big beasts.
Yeah,
they have the trappings and privileges of being a former prime minister, and I imagine maybe they want to detoxify the brand of the Conservative Party to some way, and they are giving some heft. To it.
I think there's also an aspect of it of just being a bog standard parliamentarian. We've appointed this committee to look into this. This is what the committee has found. That's what we're going with.
Yeah.
People like Theresa May were already a bit sus of Partygate before the committee report anyway. But I think outside of people who were enemies or not aligned with Boris's brand of conservatism, I think there's definitely folk in the party that would have just taken it for read that the Privileged Committee has found Boris Johnson to have been in contempt of Parliament, and that's what we're voting for. We're not going to argue the toss over it. Because on the other side, you've got people like your Leah Nitchies, your Nick Fletchers, your Bill Cashes, your Jacob Rees-Moggs, that are getting into the minutiae of it. Like, they're just clutching at straws to find a reason as to not vote for it. And if you scratch beneath the surface of that, it's purely just undying support for Boris Johnson, rather than anything that has any place in any substance or any place in reality. I don't know. What do you think? Like, is it like Theresa May just having a last fuck you to Boris, or
I don't know. I think maybe to get inside the mind of Theresa May.
To have a minute.
I think she, in terms of her profile and her legacy, she's a much more serious person. There's a reason that she's gone from ousted, disgraced former prime minister to being like big beast of the parliamentary party. I think that, and it is comparison. It's a flattering comparison to, if you look at the last five Conservative prime ministers, the last five prime ministers: Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss, Sunak. There's a real breadth in terms of ability, suitability for the role.
Yeah.
And May was a pretty disastrous prime minister and did some things that have had dreadful consequences. For
Even outside of being prime minister as home secretary.
Oh, of course.
Well,
Yeah.
Awful.
And so she can't be excused, or she can't be portioned off from taking some of the responsibility for the kind of dire straits the country's in. But you do see her and you think, ooh, there's a serious woman.
It's funny, isn't it?
It's
the Overton window of Conservative prime ministers has shifted so far to the right that even your bog standard mid-2000s right-winger looks a bit more centrist in comparison to the rest of them.
It just seems, it's also just such bollocks, like the presentation stuff about like, oh, she looks serious, so we must take her.
Yeah.
It's kind of what they used to say about Corbyn, was like Corbyn, there was a time where, do you remember when Corbyn dressed scruffier? And then he got nicer
Button
suits.
up your shirt, fix your tie, and sing the national anthem.
And then he did. He I think probably that was maybe a sensible decision. But the argument that someone, because they look worse, shouldn't be a serious politician is, unfortunately, I think to a certain extent true. Because if one person doesn't really consume the news, sees a picture in the front of a newspaper of scruffy person versus, you'd be like, oh, I want the well-presented person in the nice suit, or the nice skirt suit, or with the nice haircut, or the smart jacket, rather than someone wearing an anorak. I think it's very
Westminstery as well, because like I know I could rhyme off the top of my head maybe 5 Irish politicians that look fucking awful and have been elected representatives for 20 plus years.
But have they been in the Taoiseach?
No, oh God, no.
They're
all like,
that's my point.
They're not establishment parties.
No, that's
like,
my point. It's not about being a fringe figure.
Yeah,
I think it's about this being taken seriously, because I think it would probably happen in Ireland as well. In that,
what about Boris Johnson then? He's the exception to the rule in that way, isn't he?
He's maybe the exception that proves the rule, in that his presentation was so deliberate. As in, he would ruffle up his hair, and his thing was, I don't care. He didn't actually not care. But
it was constructed buffoonery. Yeah,
politics is all about image construction. On that bombshell, should we leave that there?
I need to process that. Yeah, so I think we should leave.
I've just taught you a thing of something about politics.
Wow.
Image matters.
Yeah. I'll come in a shirt next time. Sorry, Ed.
that was actually just commenting on your outfit.
You look fucking awful.
Yeah.